All right, everybody, here we go. We are going to talk about part two of assessment of school age kids and adults here. Um, let's talk about assessment of some personal factors, feelings, and attitudes, right? How do we do that? In particular, we're going to talk about getting clients to draw a picture of their stuttering at the beginning of therapy and at different points in therapy. We're talking about just using a simple sentence completion um, for assessment. We can use the Oasis really for assessment of personal factors, assessment of environmental factors, and activity and participation. So it's a super useful um, assessment to use. And then last, I'll just talk a little bit about locus of control um, and how that is involved in stuttering. So first, let me jump out of here and let's talk about drawing a picture of your stuttering. So, all right, having clients. This comes from the American Institute of Stuttering website. It can be really good to get like a pre-therapy. So this guy, Craig, was talking, this was this pre-drawing, what is the stuttering like? And he talked about, being on a balance board and it being really difficult and everybody's watching and it always feels like he's going to fall off the board. A lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, not sure what's going to happen next. And then after therapy, he talked about he wrote about, that it's like coming in for a landing on a sunny day. It might be a little bumpy, but he feels like he's in control. He's going to land the plane well. So just, a nice visual about, I'm much more in control. I don't feel as anxious, as worried. We got a sunshine there, right? So a much more positive feeling. So a really simple way and a nice way, especially with kids who like art and are good at working in art, can be a nice way to get that at different points. Again, you can do it before therapy, in the middle of therapy, at the end of therapy, just to see what they're thinking about. Next one will be sentence completion. This was from a while ago now. This was a sort of intensive weekend that I was involved in. But so just having people complete my stuttering is like. So this was a pre-therapy. And he's someone who had been in therapy a while. So he was able to talk about stuttering well. But he talked about my stuttering is like a choking hand that tightens when I speak, a pendulum or double-edged sword, a constant, never-ending, unrelenting struggle, a monkey on my back mocking the real true me, an upfront, in-your-face cross to bear, an enforcer of patience and self-control, a date breaker, interview killer, dead ender, right? So lots of pretty negative things, a lot going on there. This was post-therapy. My stuttering is like an anxiety wall that's slowly falling apart by using my target. So he was working, one of the things he was working on was a specific speech therapy technique that he found helpful. My stuttering is like an old bad habit whose departure I'll never miss. My stuttering is like a part of me that has taught me how to be persistent, right? So a much more positive outlook. This is another pre-test of somebody else. My stuttering is like frustration, a barrier to socialization, a problem with talking to people. This is post-test. My stuttering is like being lost in a city that I have never been to, but now I have a roadmap to help me find my way to my destination. Another pre-test from somebody else. My stuttering is like I'm trying to say something, but it won't come out, right? Pretty, simple, pretty, perfectly fine. And at the end, post-test, my stuttering is like a trap sometimes, but I know I can change my speech or manage even when I have difficulties, right? So much more positive. My stuttering is like a challenge every day. is the pre-test, post-test. My stuttering is like something I do, something that has brought me to wonderful encouragement, brought me to people who changed my life around, right? So just really a nice way to look at change, again, not from a standardized test or anything like that, but just a simple way over time to be able to see change in clients. The Oasis is a great way to look at a lot of things for clients. So it's the overall assessment of the speaker's experience of stuttering from Yaris and Queasel. And it has 4 sections: general information, reactions to stuttering, communication in daily situations, quality of life. It gives a severity rating for each of the 4 areas, and then also an overall severity rating. And it comes in child, teen, and adult versions. So here's what that Oasis looks like. This is a child version, 7 to 12. And then general information. So how often can you speak fluently? How often does your speech sound natural? How often do you use techniques or strategies? How often do you say what you want to say? How much do you know about stuttering? What helps people stutter less often? What makes people stutter more often? Right. So just some general information. How do you feel about your speech overall? Section 2, your reactions to stuttering. When you think about your stuttering, how often do you feel angry, mad, or frustrated because you have trouble saying what you say, ashamed or embarrassed, nervous or anxious? Right, so it just gives, it's a nice way. And then again, there's section 3, section 4. So it's a pretty detailed list of questions. And so it gives you some overall scores, but then it also, right, helps you. Maybe there's some things that, really stand out in here that they're struggling with or don't know about or need to change. It can also help with where to lean in therapy as well. So the Oasis is super helpful. Last thing I want to talk about is just locus of control. And there are some ways to assess that, which I think we'll probably talk about later, but just talk about the idea quickly. Locus of control is the extent to which one believes one's outcome is either under personal control, which should be an internal, or under the control of luck, fate, or powerful others, where you'd be an external. So if you have an internal locus of control, you believe that what happens to you is, a lot of it's under your control, that you have control over whether you're successful, not successful in life overall, and then in certain situations as well. Whereas if you have an external locus of control, it is the idea that, what happens to you overall and in certain situations is under the control of luck, fate, powerful others, right? So if you have an external locus of control, it means that you feel like, things on the outside of you really control what happens to you. People who are internals are described as being people who are potent, assertive, effective people. People who are externals are described as people who are retiring, less competent, and dependent on others. Internals are engaged in more peer contact as teens and young adults, right? Internals have better social functioning, right? I'm going to ask you guys about this in a forum question about why this would be, and why would externals have higher levels of anxiety? So what would it be about believing that what happens to you is out of your control? Why would that lead to greater anxiety? Internals have an active approach to life. They believe they're in control of their lives and that their decisions and actions shape outcomes. And therefore, they take a really positive and active role in health-related behaviors, right? That they are in control of things, that they're going to be proactive, right? So how would this relate to stuttering and people who stutter? An internal locus of control is an essential component of the ability to maintain behavior change, right? So not only is this person going to seek out therapy, seek out sources online, seek out, mentors, right? But and one thing we haven't talked about yet, because we haven't really talked about therapy yet in this course, is we haven't talked about relapse, right? And relapse is a real thing, no matter whether we're talking about, therapy for anxiety and depression, whether we're talking about being on a diet, whether we're talking about exercise, whether we're talking about speech and language therapy or stuttering therapy in particular, right? Relapse is a real thing, happens all the time. It's a normal part of the therapy process. So, right, if you're an internal, you think, oh, things were going well for a while and then we relapsed. Things, I started slipping back to the way things were, right? What can I do to, get things the way they were? Maybe I'm not doing something now that I was doing before. Maybe I need to seek out new information and find things out, right? So, people with an internal locus of control are going to be much more likely to be able to bounce back from the relapse that happens all the time. Whereas someone who's an external locus of control will think, oh, here we go again. Therapy didn't work. I'm not good at this. It's just my stuttering. This is just the way I talk. I can't really change it. Oh, well, right? And they'll kind of slip back. And so the relapse will end up lasting really long rather than maybe just being more of a blip, right? All right, last thing I'm going to talk about, and this is a great way to assess activity and participation, is by using an eco map. This is a picture of an eco map. I don't ever actually use a form for an eco map, but what I'll do, if I have a 12-year-old, I'll get a big piece of paper and I'll draw a circle in the middle and say, okay, who lives in your house, right? So talk about himself, maybe his sister, maybe he's got two sisters. Right here we've got John. Let's pretend the client is John and his sisters are Gwen and Joan, and the father's John Sr., the mother is Beth. And then we can talk about, okay, is your dad easier or hard to talk to and why? Is your mom easier or hard to talk to and why? What does your dad do when you stutter? What does your mom do when you stutter? Right? What does your sister Gwen do when you stutter? What does your sister Joan do when you stutter? Are they easier or hard to talk to and why? And then we can talk about, let's talk about people at school. Let's talk about your teachers, your classmates, your friends, people who aren't friends. What happens at school? Are you involved in sports, right? Who do you talk to? How does your coach handle your stuttering? What do you talk about? What do they do when you stutter? Do you try to hide and avoid, or are you open? Let's talk about friends, maybe outside of school. Let's talk about people who aren't friends. And how they treat you. And that's actually one of my favorite things to do is, right, lots of times people ask, well, how do your classmates deal with your stuttering? Oh, they're fine with it. How do your friends view your stuttering? Oh, they're fine with it. No problems. And they kind of stop there. Like kids often aren't going to offer up that somebody is teasing them. People sometimes forget to ask, how about people that are not your friends? Like, who are kids your age who maybe aren't the greatest? How do they act with your stuttering? All of a sudden, then you get them talking about teasing and bullying. Whereas if you hadn't made that extra step, that extra circle, right, then you get to really find out some things. So this is a great way to just kind of lay the child's, what their week's like on paper. Maybe they go to church or a synagogue or something on the weekend and what that's like, and just extended family grandparents, how do they deal? And kids kind of get into this and like talking about people in their life. So it's a great way to talk about not only the environment and people, but also how much are they actively engaging in school and participating in school? How much are they actively talking in sports or afternoon hobbies? Right. So the eco map can be super helpful. Again, I don't use, I don't use like a form like this. I like to draw it out on a piece of paper, and it works pretty well. Um, so environmental factors, again, the eco map's a great way to do that. You can look at supported relationships, at professionals, attitudes of society and individuals, communication services, support organizations, school, outside of school, can be a really great tool. And that, I believe, is the end of our assessment section.